How long would you say you stream at a stretch every night?
4 hours max.
4 hours, dang. So what is your policy when nature calls?
I just have a catheter.
Oh boy, that has come up around here too, mostly jokingly, but also I could totally get one.
I mean,
if desired.
Yeah, I don't think that's a good. I'm joking. Clearly, okay. I just want to make that clear.
Yes. Well, hey, look. I assumed you were joking. I would say there was about a 2% chance you were not.
So I usually do usually I get up, let's say every hour and a half, maybe for a refill of the beverage and a draining of a supply and demand situation. Drain the bladder, fill the tum-tum.
Liquid in, liquid out.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and then other more solid waste needs I try to fill either before or after.
Okay, well we didn't need to get into that.
You asked. I try not to take a dumping break during the middle of the stream, is what I'm saying.
Good Lord, man.
Yeah, you're welcome, America.
Yeah, I can't. I try to drink a lot more water than I used to these days, and I generally cannot make it through a 2-hour stream without having to get up.
Yeah, the bladder, it turns out, is less elastic now than it used to be. It's unfortunate.
Let's not get into that aspect of it. I didn't even consider that.
But yeah, I keep a water thing on the table so I can top off water if I need to. If I need to do that when there's not an opportune moment.
Like at the stream level, do you have like a be right back?
Yeah, I do have a be right back. But also, since I usually play games with other people, if I'm playing like Fortnite or PUBG or something, then I'm dead. Then that's a good opportunity for me to like mute my mic and get up and walk into the other room and refresh my beverage and maybe have a snack and come back.
That's right. Let them carry it.
Yeah. I mean, look, the benefit of having other people on the show is that you can have them carry, they can fill when you need to take 5 minutes. So
it is true. That window of kind of work from home during the pandemic before we just busted out of there. I had a good time coming up with stay tuned type stuff. Like Abby did a really nice, like people have probably seen it 100 times, like a nice, like old school TV static test pattern, stay tuned kind of thing that we were using. And I got way into pumping my giant library of video game music out to the stream over top of that and just all kinds of fun stuff.
Love that.
I've been meaning to set up that Weather Channel simulator for a very long time.
Wait, what's the Weather Channel simulator?
Oh my God, do you not know about that?
No. I was going to say, so I've been watching For All Mankind, thanks mainly to recommendations from people in the Discord.
Yeah, I heard that's gotten really good.
It's the second season. I'm in the second season now, and it's like, it's gotten a little soapy. Pretty good, though. Okay. Like they had the sea dragon in there, which I appreciate. And there's a moment in the second season when one of the characters is watching TV and they get to the end of day broadcast that you used to have, like where they play the American anthem and you see the flag and then it cuts to a test pattern. And I was just like, oh man, I haven't seen one of those. Nobody goes off the air anymore. So you don't ever see the end of day broadcast anymore.
That's sad.
Yeah.
There's something kind of romantic about that.
Well, and it also seems like maybe it was better when we didn't have 24 hours of news to fill with nonsense.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know.
I was just reading a write up about the tidbit, that little screen you talked about last week. And
yeah, it's a problem in search of a solution, or a solution in search of a problem.
Well, that was the whole idea of that screen, though. The pitch was like, hey, if you can get this information passively, just around you, then that's less reason to get your phone out and get sucked into looking at Twitter and stuff.
Yeah. Like for me, it was like, hey, I want a an on air / in a meeting sign that I can put outside my door, I think. Anyway. So what's the weather simulator thing? The Weather Channel simulator?
Taiganet.com is the TAIGA, Taiganet.com. I guess the WS4000 was the machine or system that the Weather Channel used for all of its stuff to do the broadcast with, to set up the graphics and everything.
Wow.
Somebody has written a simulator that absolutely 100% just simulates that thing.
This is incredible.
Dude, I know. I have been meaning to get this going and just put it on a stream.
I don't like that it's a self-signed thing. Man, I might just do this and leave it running all the time. Holy
don't
shit.
steal my idea. God damn it.
Oh, sorry. I thought you were going to do it as like a be right back page or something.
If I didn't want people to take my idea, I probably shouldn't talk about it on a podcast.
I mean, it's a good idea. Local weather all the time, 24/7. I mean, look, you could just have a whole network of Twitch channels. It's like Raleigh, Durham weather. You could have a Richmond, Virginia weather. You could have a San Francisco, California weather. This is pretty rad.
I think it's safe to say it's time for your local tech pod on the 8s.
Welcome to Brad and Will Made a Tech Pod. I'm Will.
I'm Brad. Hello.
Hello.
Hi.
Today, hey, we're back to basics this week.
I cannot believe it. I wasn't sure if we should actually call attention to it or not, but you just did. So let's talk about it. We're doing a topic episode.
Well, okay. So we did a lot of topic episodes early, and it turns out we mined kind of the easy ones out.
I wouldn't say they're all easy, but you know, the obvious ones, like the easy to think of ones, let's say.
Yeah. Well, and the ones that can also fill an hour is the other thing. Cause like there's a lot of stuff that we could do a deep dive episode on that would be like the deep dive, it turns out is like 30, 25 minutes. Right. Mm-hmm. And then we have another 15 minutes to kill, which is not ideal. But there's a new standard coming this fall.
Oh, another standard, you say?
I mean, look, I referenced the XKCD when we were talking about this episode. It's called Standards. It is XKCD number 927, if you care to look it up. That
one's my favorite. Like everybody references the Jenga Tower one.
The Jenga Tower one is my favorite, but yes,
the Standards one is my favorite.
Like if we had, I think there are like 5 probably XKCDs that are the genesis of this podcast and the FOSS-Pod combined.
Yeah, and
this is definitely one of them.
Ironically, those are the only ones I even know. Like I have never read XKCD. I only know those like famous ones that always make the rounds. But you know, that a couple of them are pretty spot on.
Often regular. Anyway, so
should I just like read this comic for people because this is not exactly a video podcast?
Yeah. It's titled "How Standards Proliferate."
It's all text. There's like 2 stick figures in it.
That's always that's XKCD. That's their the shtick.
Yes. How Standards Proliferate. See AC chargers, character encodings, instant messaging, etc. Situation: there are 14 competing standards. And the 2 stick figures come in. 14, ridiculous. We need to develop one universal standard that covers everyone's use cases. Yeah. Says the other stick figure. Soon. Situation: there are 15 competing standards.
So that is precisely when somebody was like, hey, Google and Apple and Amazon and a bunch of other companies are working together to produce a new internet of shit home control device standard. Here I thought, oh, wow. Okay. This is going to be great. Another thing we have to integrate with our existing configurations.
Yes. And that standard is?
It's called Matter is the application layer, and Thread is the kind of network layer, or that one of the network layers that talks to Matter.
Yeah, so I knew about Matter. I did not know as much about Thread, and Thread seems awesome. Also, I should mention, I think this episode probably grew out of our FOSS-Pod episode with
Paulus
Houtzen from Home Assistant.
Yes, exactly.
He talked about Matter a good bit in that episode, but also a ton of other stuff. That was a very good episode, if I do say so myself.
Yeah, it was one of our highest engagement episodes when I looked at analytics the other day.
Hey, it turns out a lot of people use Home Assistant. I'll link that episode in the show notes here. But he is kind of the one who really, at least for me, like impressed on me the importance of this coming standard.
Yeah. So but to preface, I guess there are a bunch of different standards that do the stuff that this does right now. Zigbee, Z-Wave. There's a bunch of Wi-Fi connected devices. There's even some Bluetooth stuff that you can kind of use with your phone, but maybe doesn't connect with a central control system in your house. And right now, if you make, say, a bulb or a switch or something like that, the vendor has to choose which of the ones they're going to support out of the box. And often they'll have like a standards. They'll say, hey, we work with Alexa, or we work with Google, or we work with HomeKit, which is Apple's standard, or SmartThings, which is the other big one. But then it turns out that they're actually just a Zigbee device or a Wi-Fi device that will work with everything. They just only are certifying for 1 or 2 because there's cost and support overhead involved with those things.
Yeah. Can we make a distinction here? And I want to make sure I've got this straight as much as laying it out for the audience. So like Wi-Fi, Zigbee, Z-Wave are all like low-level broadcast standards, right?
They're
like
networks.
Those relate to the physical signal going between devices, correct?
They are direct. So Thread, Wi-Fi, Ethernet.
Yes.
Zigbee and Z-Wave. Zigbee and Z-Wave are 2.4 gigahertz. I believe both of those. I'm not sure about that. Specs. Z-Wave is significantly older. Zigbee is a newer. It's not a direct descendant of Z-Wave, but it is designed to compete and be more modern. And they're mesh networks. Zigbee and Z-Wave are mesh networks. Wi-Fi is a point-to-point network, so you have a central hub, a Wi-Fi access point. All devices connect to that network. With a mesh network, what that means is that on the network, there are usually devices that are connected to power that can pass data along from others, and then the devices that are battery based, like motion sensors and like window and door sensors, stuff like that. Maybe even a water like a flood sensor will be battery powered, and you'll connect to those. They don't route between different networks, different devices, but they'll connect to one connected to mains power device, and then that device will pass on its packets for them.
Right.
The idea is that with a mesh network, the more devices you add to the network, the stronger the network is as a whole, and the more resilient it is. It doesn't always work that way in practice.
You don't say.
Yeah, weird.
But I did want to make that distinction early on because, like, by way of comparison, I think that makes it easier to understand where Thread and Matter exist in the stack. So, like, I think you just said this, but like, Thread is on the same level as Wi-Fi or Ethernet or Zigbee.
Yeah. And Matter is, so then the one layer up on the application layer, typically you have a hub box made by Google, and which is, I think their thing is called, I didn't even write it down. It has a different name. Weave, I think, is what it's called.
Interesting. Is that not just Google Home? I thought. Like,
so Google Home is the application they use to control those things. Okay. Weave is their kind of application protocol layer.
Okay, so Weave is analogous to Alexa or Apple Home.
Is it analogous to HomeKit?
HomeKit, sorry. HomeKit is at this level, and then Apple Home is the interface on top of that.
Or the smart things, or your Home Assistant hub is kind of at the similar place.
Right. So Matter is essentially a vendor agnostic equivalent of HomeKit
protocol.
HomeKit, or
that lives on top of IPv6 is the other important part of this.
This is a lot.
So in the current scheme, you have HomeKit and all these different vendor specific application layers that you can maybe glue together with something like Home Assistant, or there's other things that do the same thing.
Yeah.
So like Home Assistant in my network, I use as the central repository for all devices. All devices come into there, and then it passes out support for those devices to things like Google Home and Apple HomeKit and Alexa, so that you can talk to your Alexa, you can talk to your Google Home, and it will control all of those devices. But HomeKit is the central glue that holds it all together.
Right. So that is literally the only thing I use Home Assistant for. I don't use any advanced scripting functionality or anything. I the only reason I ended up on Home Assistant is because I had Apple HomeKit devices. I've got like Belkin Wemo stuff. I've got some TP-Link Casa stuff. You know, it was just I ended up with different devices. I've got some iDevices stuff.
So this is this is what happens to everybody, right?
So like I just wanted one thing that could control every device I have, and like that's the aim of Thread and Matter, is to not have. I'm going to keep using Home Assistant because it does a lot of cool stuff. But
this is the aim of Matter. Thread is a different thing. Thread is a lower level. Thread is solving a different problem. So
Thread is still something that will let all these different companies' devices talk to each other on the same network. The same Thread network.
Yeah. Let's say, there.
As of, we'll get to this later, as of Thread 1.3, all of the authentication will be compatible between different vendors.
Well, so the interesting thing, and it took me a while to kind of suss out why Thread matters. Like Thread is neat technology.
Do you want to rephrase that?
Oh God,
we can't use the word matters.
Isn't that the name of the title? I think that's an episode title, actually, accidentally.
This is
okay. So why Thread is important, and why Thread is a valid successor to Zigbee, I think is the thought for like low power mesh networks. And the interesting thing is that, like IPv6 over Ethernet, you can run multiple applications on your Wi-Fi network. Like whereas Zigbee and Z-Wave are basically single application networks, and then you connect to that application if you want to have more advanced functionality within them. With Thread, you can have Google Weave, and you can have HomeKit, and you can have Matter all running on the same network using the IPv6 Thread layer, which we'll talk about in a second. We're going to get into the low level detail here in a moment. It's just we figured have the high level overview, and then we'll kind of drill into the details on Thread. Then we'll drill into the details on Matter, and you guys can suss out the things that are interesting to you from there. Is the thought. So most of the devices are vendor specific kind of. You can connect other devices to them. They may not actively support that. The exception is HomeKit, which is often only works with HomeKit. So like there's a bunch of Wemo devices and stuff like that you can buy, which is I think Belkin's brand.
Yes, that's Belkin.
That only connect to HomeKit or only connect to Alexa or only connect to Google's Weave thing. Making all of the different devices connect to each other requires SmartThings or Home Assistant or something like that most normal people aren't probably going to futz with. So what ends up happening in their homes is they have some things that only work with Google, and they have some things that only work with Apple Home, and they have some things that only work with Alexa, and it's a real bad usability situation because like no normal human is going to think, oh, okay, if I want to turn off the lights in my kid's room, I have to use Alexa. And if I want to turn off the lights in the living room, I have to use Google Home, and the doorbell's only on Apple.
Yeah, so it's terrible. And sorry, to make matters worse, there's an extra onboarding layer on top of that, which is that regardless of which one of those platforms your device runs on, you more than likely need to download the manufacturer-specific app to even onboard it onto your network in the first place. And like that often requires you to make a user account. So like I've also got the TP-Link Casa app and the Belkin Wemo app, and I had to make accounts on both of those just to get those things on my Wi-Fi. It's
the worst version of that is that you need to buy a hub for the vendor, like Lutron works with their Caseta stuff, where you have to have a hub because they use a special variant of the 802.11. 802.15.4 or whatever, like they're using their own custom radios. Anyway, the upshot is all of this stuff is designed to build a network and application protocol layer that then your different devices and different services can connect to agnostically without having to glue it all together with a Home Assistant or something like that. Now, if you have a Home Assistant, you can still connect it to this and you'll have a higher level of configurability and stuff like that with Home Assistant, just like you do right now. But you don't have to do that to get everything talking to each other, which is a massive improvement.
Yeah, huge. Also, I want to point out real quick, this is not just some third-party standards body that is trying to make this happen. Like all these companies are part of this effort. So I'm sorry, what is it called? It's the Connectivity Standards Alliance.
Connectivity Standards Alliance. It is the renamed Zigbee Alliance. It uses a lot of the same underlying technology as Zigbee, which we'll talk about in a bit. Right. But currently, like the big names are Apple, Google, Amazon, Home Assistant, Belkin, Comcast, GE, IKEA, Yale, SmartThings, LG, and Lutron. So like it's all of the big players are participating in some way or another. How that connectivity ends up working in reality in the final Matter standard remains to be seen. This is theoretically arriving this fall. It's been delayed a couple of times, mostly because of pandemic related stuff.
Yeah. Matter, to be clear, Matter is the thing that is slated to arrive this fall. There are Thread. I guess we'll get to this later. It's a lot of detail. There are some Thread devices on the market now, but
yeah,
some of those early ones don't support everything you might want. So we'll get into that.
Well, and because Thread is evolved out of the Zigbee Alliance and uses the same. Okay, so let's get into Thread. What is Thread? I guess is the next step. Low-level wireless network. It's a low-level. I wrote this down so I wouldn't mess it up. It's a low-level wireless network that utilizes mesh networking and IPv6 to provide a modern, reliable way to connect low power. That's an important phrase there. Smart home devices to your network. It's exclusively for those. So things that require high bandwidth, like cameras and music streaming boxes and stuff like that, TV streaming boxes may connect, but you're not going to run that data over your network. The actual throughput is around 250 kilobits per second, which is more than sufficient for things like light bulbs and switches, light switches, motion sensors, door sensors, water sensors, stuff like that. But you're not going to do music even across this. Music is high bandwidth in that context.
Yeah. So in that situation, like the device would get onto the network through Thread, but you would pipe the heavy data through, say, Wi-Fi. Or even Ethernet.
Now the weird thing is, and we'll talk about this more, but like those higher bandwidth devices like Apple TVs and HomeKit speakers and Alexas and Google Homes, Nest Hubs and Nest speakers and stuff like that are going to be Thread connected devices. But they're going to be the kind of connection points where your Thread network interfaces with the larger Wi-Fi / IP network that's in your home.
Yeah. Sorry.
I was going to say, and a lot of those things are going to be backwards and forwards compatible. So like if you have HomeKit, if you have what are the Apple speakers called?
Oh gosh, aren't they just branded under Home?
If you have HomePod minis,
HomePod.
If you have HomePod minis in your house, those are already Thread enabled, and you can connect your Thread devices to them and they'll serve as the hub. So you don't need like a SmartThings hub or a Home Assistant hub or an Alexa hub, even if you have the right devices on your network already. You may already, if you have smart home devices, you probably already have some Thread hubs on your network. So Thread routers is what they're called on your network already.
So Thread, you've said this already. Thread uses 802.15.4 radio, which is the same thing that Zigbee uses.
Yeah. It's designed for mesh networks using 2.4 gigahertz spectrum. The Verge ran a really good article with some folks who are major representatives of this effort. I kind of just want to quote from the sidebar. I'll link this in the show notes. They have a really nice infographic and very basic, easy to understand explanation of how a Thread network is put together that I think is kind of awesome. Like Thread sounds awesome. If it works as advertised, it seems like a really neat standard. Okay, so I'm just going to read from this. Any Thread device you add to your smart home becomes either a router or an end device. A router is a device plugged into power, such as a light bulb or a smart plug. An end device is a battery-operated device, such as a motion sensor or door lock. Yeah.
The first router on the network, again, the router is plugged into power, becomes the leader, able to direct other routers. If one leader fails, another router can take its job.
So, and the leaders are now called border hubs, I believe.
Well, that's the last bit of it. So there's an extra wrinkle there. A Thread network can support upwards of 250 devices, including 64 routers. It can also support multiple border routers, which are always powered devices with an internet connection. So a router is on wall power. A border router also has an internet connection.
But this is where the devices you already have being border routers is exciting, because it means you probably have a Thread network in your house already and you don't know it.
Right. That's the thing, is like that might sound kind of complicated, but like what this really does is obviate the need for a central like controller, a central like a Philips Hue hub or any kind of like a Zigbee. Whatever, like these, it's decentralized the way the internet is, right? Like it's just a bunch of nodes that talk to each other, and a bunch of them can be gateways out to your LAN and the internet.
Well, and the other difference is the requirement that mains power connected devices are routers. They don't necessarily have to be border routers that connect to the larger internet, but they do need to pass packets, because with Zigbee, that's an optional feature that a lot of vendors just don't support. So you have to really have, let's say, detailed understanding of the devices that are connected to your network to know that your GE smart bulbs don't have router functionality, but your Cree smart bulbs do. And your Hue bulbs that have a weird subset of Zigbee anyway that has to talk to their own hub. It's a challenging situation for normal people.
So in your understanding, is it a requirement that every wall powered Thread device is a router?
Everything that I've read so far has people from the Connectivity Standards Alliance saying if it's connected to mains, it's a router.
That's kind of
so. Whether that's a requirement or not is unclear. I didn't go through the entire spec for the protocol, so I'm not 100%.
The idea of light bulbs directing network traffic in this setup is kind of hilarious to me. But
so the weird thing about light bulbs is, and I think the reason Zigbee didn't require this for light bulbs is specifically because if you're putting smart bulbs in, you're probably connecting them to like physical switches that when somebody turns off the lights in your office, if you have smart bulbs connected to that light switch, then they don't have power anymore and therefore are no longer routers. In the Zigbee world, routers going away is real bad. So like if you physically turn off a light switch that is a router light switch, it will jack up the entire Zigbee net mesh unless you have a absolute buttload of Zigbee routers on your network.
It's hard for me to understand why they designed it in such a way that turning the light off also disables the network functionality. Like, couldn't that have remained active on power while the light itself was off? That's
okay. So there's two things. If you say, "Hey Google, turn off the light," then it's going to turn off the light with software, which is fine. That works.
Right. That's what I mean. Yeah.
If somebody walks into the room and physically flips off the switch that's been there since 1950.
Oh, sure.
Oh,
I didn't realize I didn't realize that's the switch you meant. I thought you meant just turning the light off at all.
Yeah, no. I mean a physical hardwired switch to the bulb socket.
Yeah. Or for that matter, somebody could unscrew the light bulb from the thing unknowingly.
Yeah. I mean, look, you could rearrange your living room and move a lamp that turns out to be in a key spot and is a Zigbee node, is a Zigbee router node.
Right.
So like I've had in my house personally a lot of problems getting the Zigbee mesh to collapse because for example, it turns out the smart plug that was using our Christmas tree when I set up the Zigbee network last time was the key node in the house. And when I took this Christmas tree down and unplugged that smart plug, Zigbee network on the back half of the house collapsed.
Cool.
Theoretically, this should heal better. And the fact that you can have multiple border routers throughout the house versus one Zigbee hub should mean that if the back half of the house and the front half of the house get disconnected from each other, it just works itself out and you continue staying connected.
That sounds awesome. Like decentralized and self-healing are the kind of key terms here to me.
Now, we've heard this before. Zigbee is supposed to be self-healing too. It's just wildly dependent on your devices and your hub, whether it actually works or not.
I mean, you're right. It does seem like there could be edge cases you could end up in where you have a ton of battery-powered Thread devices and only, say, one wall-powered one, and then you only have one router, and that could still be problematic.
But it seems like you can solve that problem by plugging in some smart switches throughout the house or something like that, like smart plugs throughout the house. Anyway, the upshot for this whole network is the network throughput, like I said, is around 250 kilobits per second, which is really, really low. And most data packet transfers are happening at like a single or dual or 2 packet level. So like you're talking about 20 bytes of data from a bulb or a motion sensor or something like that to indicate that motion is happening and motion's stopped. So often like the routing information is bigger than the actual data packet itself. The whole thing is optimized for latency.
Yeah, that's one of the coolest things about this whole thing.
Zigbee also is optimized for latency, but it tends to take a little bit longer sometimes. I think the latency is Zigbee latency and Thread latency are going to be pretty analogous. The difference is like an IP-based, cloud-based smart plug or something that has to go out to a server on the internet and come back, which can have a 250 millisecond round trip time or something, which means that there's a noticeable lag. A quarter of a second is a noticeable lag when you're used to instant switches happening.
Yeah. And everything we have is Wi-Fi. I mean, it's all going through Home Assistant. So here it's all at least local travel, but there is still like some perceptible lag between tapping a button on my phone and the light coming on.
Well, and Wi-Fi is a higher latency network than these mesh networks typically. Yeah. Everything uses UDP, so that means it has to handle the data, like lost data or out of order packet arrival on the application layer rather than the network protocol layer, which is probably a good thing because they should be doing that anyway. Often with this kind of network device, stuff coming out of order is you end up replicating that effort on the application layer and the network protocol layer anyway. So it just increases the network traffic a lot. And this means that it should theoretically be able to ping the devices and say, hey, I missed that. Can you send it again? And it'll work itself out rather than it happening, like I said, 2 times at the application and the network protocol layer. The weird thing about this being based on Zigbee is on the same network protocol as Zigbee is that it means that often these devices are going to be software upgradable. So like if you have a device that already supports Zigbee, if it has enough processing and compute on the device and the vendor decides to write a Thread stack for it in addition to a Zigbee stack for it, you might just get a software upgrade that makes a device that's a Zigbee device in your house a Thread device.
That's cool. That's neat. Yeah, like to put it another way, Zigbee devices already have the radio and antenna hardware they need.
Yeah,
to participate in this if they have enough memory and stuff to be upgraded.
Now, the bad news is it's unclear to me whether I think you're probably going to still need some device specific applications to do things like firmware upgrades and stuff like that, because it's unclear to me that there is talk of firmware upgrade protocols for either Thread or Matter. That part is a little bit unclear to me. Some of this stuff is woven into each other, even when you read the core specs. But it seems like at least for the stuff that's available now, you have to use a vendor specific app to update firmware, and that may change over time. But it's for now, vendor specific is the way it goes. The other thing is that TI, which is one of the vendors that makes a lot of the chips that do this radio work, is claiming that Zigbee is slightly more power efficient than Thread. But the point isn't. I think the goal here is to get people off of Wi-Fi only devices where it doesn't make sense because the Wi-Fi chips are more expensive. They use more power. They congest your network. You don't need them for this.
They're
so
slower.
Moving them to Thread seems like it's a win in that regard.
It is a little weird when I pull up the list of DHCP leases on my router, and like over half the devices on my entire network are smart plugs and other related.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like everything does not need its own IP. Right.
I'm glad that I have most of that stuff on Zigbee in my house because it's a lot of devices, and I'd rather not I don't want to have 256 device subnets for my tiny little house because of all the devices that 3 people have connected, plus all the smart home crap.
Right. I don't know if you have an answer for this. I'm not even sure that I'm asking the questions accurately, but like the IPv6 is self-contained within the Thread network, correct?
IPv6. Presumably it's addressable from outside because IPv6 works differently with NAT and routing because there's so many IP addresses. You can theoretically address stuff from everywhere. Most routers don't traverse the internet to the network for obvious reasons.
Yeah.
My assumption is that with Matter on Thread, you'll be able to traverse the border router without any kind of NAT or translation layer.
Okay. That was kind of my question was like, for example, is your router going to need to both support and have enabled IPv6 support?
That is a very good question. I don't know. I would assume that we're going to have to turn IPv6 on for most of this stuff to work.
Right. Or not that you would ever do this, but like, could I ping one of these Thread devices from my PC, for example?
Presumably,
like, you know what I mean? Like, not that it's that is just me wanting to understand how these things are connected, not like, oh, I need to ping my smart plugs. It's just like, can a device on, say, your Wi-Fi or your wired LAN just talk to Thread devices through that router kind of gateway?
Presumably, yes. My guess is that none of these devices are going to have ping running on them, so your ping won't actually work.
Yeah, or ICP or whatever it is.
Yeah.
I just meant more like, are they technically all on the same LAN or not?
I was going to say the thing to remember here is that Thread is the last part is range. The stated range for 802.15.4 is 100 meters, but that's like line of sight in a field in Iowa someplace, not actually in a congested house. In my experience, depending on whether you're on a battery or a mains powered device, you're looking at like 10 meters on a good day. And realistically lower when you get around stuff like refrigerators and washing machines and brick walls and things like that. The upshot is that this is a complement for Wi-Fi and not a replacement, that you'll put the things that don't require large data, that latency is important and don't require large network throughput on the Thread network. And then the things that do require like video and audio and things like that will live on Wi-Fi, and probably they won't cross except in the device, the example of those border routers, which you'll want to have throughout your house, just to help with the kind of resiliency of the Thread network.
Probably worth pointing out that the Thread network traffic is encrypted by default.
So Zigbee's encrypted as well.
Okay.
Z-Wave, it's optional based on your devices, like old Z-Wave. Z-Wave is old enough that encryption was still a state secret and we weren't allowed to export it. So there's a lot of old Z-Wave devices that don't actually support encryption or don't support meaningful encryption. The Zigbee encryption, I didn't actually dig into the details of it, but I looked at it and I was like, this looks like it's maybe not as encrypted as you might want. The new stuff is elliptical AES. It's like heavy duty. It's actually meaningful encryption is the quote I saw for that.
So like for example, border routers that are connected to the internet can't spy on or can't understand the traffic from other Thread devices that is running through them.
Yeah, the packets are encrypted to the point that they won't know what's passing through them. They just know that something's passing from device A to device C.
So I wonder, and I bet some people in the Discord will have opinions about this, but like, one of probably the most common like VLAN scenario that I see people using in home settings is making a VLAN just for Internet of Things devices that are on their that are on Wi-Fi, because they don't want those things. Security is bad on a lot of those things. Like they're worried about vulnerabilities. They don't want those able to talk to actually important machines in their house. Like I wonder if like does having everything on a Thread network instead just kind of obviate that problem or solve that problem? So
the one of the goals of Matter and Thread seems to be, hey, we probably need to get all of these things encrypted and safe. My understanding is that, yes, this will, because everything is running inside this different network, you don't have the widely accessible, like you're not connecting to some weird cloud service, and then that cloud service is a vector for you to bring threats into the home. You still need to keep your stuff updated. Like it's always like, so I guess I'm much less worried about Zigbee exploits because you have to be within 20 feet of my house to hit the Zigbee network than I am about a smart hub exploit. So yeah, I mean, I think generally more secure, but as always, it remains to be seen. Having better encryption between the devices is good.
Yeah. I mean, obviously everything can have exploits and vulnerabilities. I mean, I guess that really just goes to that same question I asked earlier about like, can devices on your regular LAN talk to devices on the Thread network by default? But
seems like the answer is yes.
Yeah. Still a lot of details to understand here.
Let's see. I think we've gotten the thread route. The border router is pretty well established. They are the connection points. Having multiples is good. Like this is another one of the big differences between Zigbee and the thread stuff.
So again, that's something that's plugged into the wall power and has an internet connection. So that's obviously like you've written here, like Google Nest hubs, like Apple TVs, HomePod Minis, like Alexa. I'm trying to think of like more esoteric devices that would also have internet connections.
Thermostats.
Okay, sure.
Smoke detectors, probably like doorbell cameras, stuff like that.
Okay. So it's actually a pretty broad spread of product categories that can serve in that role.
It seems like it's dependent on A, the connection to power, and B, the amount of compute and memory on the devices. And whether the vendor wants to support them. Lots of these already exist. So Apple TV 4K, second gen boxes, Google Nest hubs, the Max and V2 small one, and HomePod Minis and Alexa 4th gen. I don't know if Alexa 4th gen has actually landed, but the HomePod Minis all already support the border router functionality, and like you can connect Thread devices to them today. The neat thing is, it seems like if you have a Thread network running, you don't have to specify which one you connect to. It just sees it on your local network when you connect something.
Oh, that's cool.
And it just magically connects. I don't understand exactly how that works. It's a little bit unclear. I actually ordered a couple of smart plugs so I can try it out and see how stuff works. So we'll talk about maybe on the end of month question and answer episode.
Do you want to say what they are?
I got a Wemo smart plug because I needed a new smart plug.
And are those being advertised as Thread enabled? Like, is that prominent in the packaging and marketing? Or
if you click on the Thread page from Belkin's site, it takes you to the devices that have that. And they have two Thread devices right now. So,
okay. Because I mean, I want to say right now, like first of all, I don't have any experience with Zigbee. So it sounds like some of the things that I think sound exciting about Thread have already existed in the previous standard, but still, having nothing but Wi-Fi enabled smart stuff around here. Like I want to cease buying any smart stuff until Thread is like really proliferated, and like, well, it seems like you're really going to want support for this across the board if you can get it.
Yeah, I mean the big benefit to people is that you don't have to buy a separate hub if you already have one of the established border routers, right? I don't anticipate buying a whole lot more Zigbee stuff, knowing what I know about Thread now.
I actually was just thinking about getting into some people in the Discord had found I've really been wanting to monitor energy usage on my PC and my NAS.
Yeah.
Some people in the Discord had found some smart plugs, some Zigbee smart plugs that did like pretty good granular energy monitoring.
Mm-hmm.
That I was kind of just about to buy a Zigbee. I mean, like Zigbee receivers, like $20. It's not.
Well, but assuming you have a machine to run the USB stick,
you gotta plug it into. I mean, I would plug it into the Pi that runs my Home Assistant. But like the point is, though, like investing in Zigbee at this late date is probably not the best idea because we're like right here on the cusp of the successor.
Yeah. Now, I was going to say it's we'll talk about how this is going to work in the real world, and where you have an established, where you already have some stuff that runs this at the end of the show. But I am not going to spend money on probably Zigbee stuff that's not going to get upgraded at this point. Is my official policy. I think that's it. Like the idea. Though the last part is there's some housekeeping stuff that is a problem with Zigbee and also Z-Wave, but Z-Wave is kind of irrelevant at this point. Like things that fall off the network due to dead low batteries, not reflecting the battery status as they start to fail is a perennial problem with Zigbee. Zigbee, like door sensors, motion sensors, stuff like that. I don't know. Like I haven't seen whether this addresses that. Like that part is unclear to me. And I'm curious if, for example, the standard for showing battery life remaining is actually a standard, or if it's just up to the vendors to pass that information with all the other data. Light bulbs that don't report their status, so the controller has to track it and base it on whether you have turned the light switch, the physical light switch in the room, on and off, is another one. So like a lot of the smart bulbs don't actively ping back with whether they're on and what their brightness is and all that stuff. So if the hub and the switch and the bulb get out of sync, you don't have any idea it's not bad. It's just annoying. This is all annoying stuff, not like end of the world problems. There are a big list of benefits, and I'll hit those real quick and then we can move on. But the config and setup being the same for all the devices and all the vendors, it seems like a really huge win.
For sure.
Whether that actually comes to fruition or not remains to be seen.
Yeah, this whole effort has been in motion for some years now. So, and like we said, all the major players are in there. So like you hope this is all pretty well thought out.
And not just, hey, now we have 15 standards instead of 14. Yeah. The thread meshes handing off between different border routers if something moves or something disconnects or whatever is really good. It does work without Wi-Fi, without internet. If your internet goes down and you still have power, then the thread devices will continue to work, assuming your hub, you can still connect to those hubs and everything will still work theoretically, assuming you have devices that don't require cloud connections connected to this. And you can use multiple application layers on top of the thread network, which is really I think I didn't kind of appreciate how big a deal that is until I looked at it and was like, oh, right. Imagine if you could only run, your Apple TV connection to streaming video over Wi-Fi. If you had a Wi-Fi network and that was all you could do over it, or you had a Wi-Fi network and all you could do over it was use HTTPS and connect to web browsers, you couldn't do any music streaming. You couldn't do any. HTTPS is probably a bad example because everything runs over HTTPS. But like, imagine you had to have a network for curl, right?
Right.
For all those curl API transfers, and then you had to have another one for HTTPS, another one for streaming video, and another one for streaming audio. It's ludicrous when you think about how Wi-Fi works, and that's how the Zigbee and Z-Wave stuff worked prior to the thread. Okay, this is kind of turning into a monster episode, but let's talk about Matter a little bit, because this is the part that's both more amorphous and more interesting to me, I think, than the low-level protocol.
Yeah. Like Matter, like we said, just again at the top line, like Matter is analogous to HomeKit, Alexa, like the vendor specific platforms, the software level that runs on top of Zigbee or Wi-Fi or Thread, which is the network.
But this is vendor agnostic.
But yes, this one. So like I guess the big question I have out of the gate is like, are all those vendor specific standards going to coexist alongside Matter, or is everybody slowly going to move over to Matter? Because like Paul has told us on the FOSSPOD episode that there is room in the Matter spec for vendor specific extensions, so they can build their own functionality as part of Matter down the line if they want to go that way. But having all these even with the unifying effect of Thread at the networking level, like still having all these different software platforms competing seems like a real pain if it goes that way.
Well, it's expensive for the vendors, which adds cost to consumers theoretically. I think my guess is that we'll see. Well, there's going to be legacy stuff in the channel for a really long time that just says works with HomeKit or works with Google Nest or whatever. I think that we will see this if this works as it should. I think we'll see this go pretty fast. Meaning 5 years, not 15.
Yeah.
The focus is to make sure that your hardware will work with other hardware you run. So your Google hardware will be able to talk to your Apple hardware and your Apple Watch and your Alexa speaker in a meaningful way. The thing that is important to note is that this is just for low traffic stuff pretty much in the beginning. Like there aren't a lot of like high data throughput features in this, but that is extensive. Like they're going to continue extending and adding more categories that they support to this as time goes on. As with Thread, Matter will let you run multiple applications on the network. So instead of having to worry about whether you're a HomeKit network or a Weave network or a Zigbee and Z-Wave network, you'll connect everything to the same network, and then you can use your Google Home app, or you can use your Apple Home app, or you can use your Alexa voice control or whatever, and it'll all work the same way, and they'll all see the same devices in a way that you have to be very deliberate and careful about now if you want to have a similar functionality.
So that was the thing I kind of wanted to come in here and ask you. Like, I know that is the pitch. I know that's how this is supposed to work, but like from a realistic, practical standpoint, like, are we going to get to that utopia where, like, okay, say you want to use, I don't know, an Apple TV, like you like the Apple ecosystem. Yeah. Like, are you definitely for sure really going to just be sitting there controlling Google devices and Amazon devices from the interface on the Apple TV and everybody? Like, are we actually going to get to that utopia of just everybody's stuff is friendly to everybody else's stuff? Like, I guess, or put it another way, like our corporate politics and kind of walled garden sorts of policies still going to kind of muck this whole thing up, do you think?
I mean, TBD.
Yeah, I guess there's no way to know. It sounds too good to be true, I guess is what I'm trying to say. It seems like people, like different companies always have different interests that are opposed to each other, and like things don't always work out as smoothly as you would like.
Well, so the thing is, you can do that stuff right now. But you have to use some connective glue, whether it's SmartThings or Home Assistant or something else to make it all work.
Right. That's what I mean, though. Like, I'm saying out of the box for everyone. Like, do you really think we're actually going to get to the point where everything does that?
I mean, that's the promise. So, like, they have gotten executives from the big companies that are involved with this that usually don't talk to each other a lot on the board. Like, they're all the CEO and CTO and CFO, all the people, CMO are all from the different companies.
Yeah, I guess, I mean,
so they're talking.
Maybe a less jaded approach to this is that it is actually good for everyone in terms of selling more products if they work in more places with more things.
Well, and I think the big key here is that instead of you having to choose whether your allegiance is to Apple or Google or Amazon, like, this is a rising tide lifts all ships situations, because it means that, so Alexa is not the only one that's connected to your network now, because you can connect multiple run multiple applications on the same network. It does give you because the network is portable between applications now in a way that it wasn't before. Like, if you wanted to move to a different Zigbee hub, you had to disconnect all of the light bulbs and then manually reconnect each one to the network, which is like a multi-hour process if you have 20 bulbs in your house, which isn't a ton of bulbs. The benefit is they can compete with each other on features and capabilities. And because you can run multiple applications on the same network, that's portable. So if I want to switch from using Apple Home to Google Home, because that Google Home has some sick new feature that I'm really excited about, I can do that without it being like a multi-day event and me having to go through and reprogram a bunch of nonsense. Like, it's the same thing. If I want to use Home Assistant because the scripting is more capable there, I connect to the network. It sees all the stuff that's on there, and then I can just go, which is really exciting. I think like, I like the idea of these companies saying, hey, yeah, we're going to compete on features instead of lock-in. That seems like it's good for everybody.
Yeah, absolutely. That is the ideal. Maybe I should not be so cynical.
Well, I mean, look, it doesn't always work this way.
Some skepticism is probably always warranted when something sounds this good.
I think the skepticism is, I always think the skepticism is warranted, but I mean, they've been working on it for a long time, and everybody seems to be operating in good faith from what I can tell. The configuration for Matter seems to be relying on Bluetooth LE, which uses the same spectrum as the 802.15.4, the 2.4 gigahertz spectrum, and basically you'll get the device close and it'll pass the Matter credentials to the new hardware, rather than doing all of the infinity of different ways that you connect devices now.
That is,
HomeKit uses QR codes and Weave uses NFC, and like, there's a bunch of different ways you do stuff.
Yeah. The onboarding is maybe the thing I'm the most excited about here. And especially like anything that prevents you from having to deal with a vendor specific app every time you want to add a new device to your network. If it's all like what you're describing is all kind of like gesture and proximity based. If it's all just like hold a button down on your new smart plug and then like say, hold your phone near it and blah, blah, blah. Or you know what I mean? Like, if it's more about just like plug a thing in and hit some buttons and it works, that's fantastic.
I just never want to have to do the 1 second on, 2 second off, 1 second on, 2 second off, 1 second on, 2 second off timing to reset a light bulb ever again.
Playing light bulb Morse code is
not Matter at launch is going to support light stuff, plugs, bulbs, switches, etc. door locks, thermostats and HVAC boxes, blinds and shades, security type sensors like motion, door and window, smoke and carbon monoxide sensors, garage door controllers, wireless access points and routers. Presumably those are going to be like the border routers, and like the Amazon Eero boxes are border routers now out of the box as well. And then TV and streaming boxes presumably also as border routers.
Sure. I had not even considered I know there are motorized shades out there. I had not even considered the idea of automated motorized shades. I mean, as somebody with a gigantic bay window in the living room.
Oh man, I've thought about it.
Like giant bay window and a plasma TV don't mix well, I will say. And like,
no, you need those shades.
Most TVs though, but yeah, like I literally need blackout curtains to play games and for large swaths of the day.
Yeah,
that sounds like living.
It's tempting. All of the Matter also requires encryption between all the devices. Which is more important, as you pointed out, because we're running IPv6 rather than private networks that are gated by like a hub of some kind. It's unclear. Like, so the question for me is how this stuff interacts for people who are starting from scratch. Yeah, just buy All Thread and buy Matter stuff. If you already have a bunch of Zigbee devices, you already have a bunch of Wi-Fi devices, you already have like HomeKit or Google Nest or whatever it is, how does this work for you? And I think you're probably still looking at a hub world for this, right? You're still looking at a Home Assistant hub or SmartThings or something that speaks to everybody and can kind of connect everything together. And at that point, yes, Matter is just going to be the 15th spec on top of the other 14. There's some interoperability problems right now that are probably going to, and also I think probably in the market, you're going to see non-thread devices linger for years. Like you're going to see cheap Wi-Fi plugs, smart plugs from China, which like, man, I don't know about those because a lot of them are UL listed, which seems really scary to me for something I can plug 15 amps worth of draw into.
Yes, that was a big consideration when I was looking for like a smart plug that I could monitor like PC usage through, because boy, this thing pulls a lot of watts when I'm say playing a game or whatever.
Yeah, and you don't want to suddenly start having crashes because your smart plug is not able to cope with the 15 watts that comes out of your wall plug.
Yes,
or 15 amps that comes out of your wall plug. Yeah. But there are a bunch of like legitimate device. Like I don't want to replace motion sensors in all my rooms. Honestly, I don't want to have motion sensors in my room. I want to have UWB things that detect which phone is in the room and turn on lights based on that stuff. I think I think we're in a place where things are about to get a lot smarter in ways that are both really good if you're for usability and maybe a little scary for privacy focused stuff.
Yeah, that was what I was about to say. What does UWB stand for?
Ultra wideband.
Oh,
so
right,
it's the directional radio that is in the newer phones.
But like I don't like personally, I don't love that use case because I don't want to have to make sure my phone is in my pocket, even in my own house, is every second.
Do you not have your phone in your pocket all the time?
Oh, my phone sits on the coffee table or the desk most of the time.
Oh man, I always have my phone in or I have a watch on alternately.
So I was going to say, like if a watch would do it, I mean, that doesn't help with the privacy stuff as much, but at least from a like just general practice standpoint, like you're going to have a thing on your wrist more likely than you are to have a thing in your pocket.
Well, I was going to say the other privacy implication is that means now you have to think about who you're going to give access, which companies, which of the faceless multinationals you're going to give access to your private network. Like, am I going to put Amazon on my Matter network? No, I'm not going to buy a Roomba. I'm not going to buy an Eero router, and I'm not going to buy Ring devices.
Amazon buy Roomba?
Amazon bought Roomba the other day.
Wait, like literally
like last week or the week before.
Wow, I missed that.
Yeah, so that means Amazon now presumably has access to data about the internal layout of your house, which is really creepy. I don't like that. I'm not going to give Facebook access to the same information. I'm hesitant to give Google access to that information, frankly.
Yeah.
I feel like I have a better relationship with Apple from a data privacy standpoint because they don't have any businesses that involve selling my data.
Right. I feel like Apple built a whole lot of public capital with the whole iMessage FBI stuff a few years ago.
I mean, look, they all buy and spend capital on that stuff on the reg, but I do like, I'm more inclined to give Apple access to that data than I am to give one of the other big companies.
Yeah, I'm the same way, but even then I'd rather not.
But at the same time, I have a bunch of Google Nest speakers in the house, and They're really nice for playing music. I can just say, hey, play me some whatever from Spotify, and it plays.
Yeah. I mean, that's, we, again, go listen to that FOSSPOD episode. That was a major point or a theme of that interview was this is one of the many reasons Home Assistant is cool, is that it gives you a central way to control this stuff without having to send a bunch of data out to a suspicious cloud of some sort.
Yeah, exactly. So the Matter stuff doesn't launch. I was gonna say the other thing is there's interoperability problems.
Yes.
So, Thread's not final. It's going to keep growing forever, it seems like. Probably same thing for Matter.
And I couldn't find a ton of information about devices being upgradable. I would assume a lot of them are, or maybe some of them are not. So I guess prior to Thread 1.3.0, devices were not able to share authentication credentials between each other as part
between
of the spec.
Manufacturers, right?
Yes, between manufacturers. And I didn't see anything about being able to upgrade, like, say, the Thread version on a device. Maybe that's vendor specific, but the warning in that Verge story was essentially like, hey, Thread devices before 1.3 may just not be able to support this ever.
Well, so one of the reasons I think this stuff is happening now, and we finally reached a point where it's coming out, is that the low barrier, the minimum viable spec for this kind of functionality and the minimum viable hardware that vendors will ship when they're looking to shave a half a cent off of the millions of these things that they do, those lines crossed each other sometime in the last couple of years. And I think that my assumption is that if you support any version of Thread, at some point you'll see an upgrade, with the exception of maybe the very, very, very early stuff that's out right now.
Yeah, that's the hope. I mean, it would be great to not have to get in a situation where you're like digging through minutia before you buy a new thing to make sure it's got the right version of Thread on it to do everything.
Yeah, I would hope that is not the way this ends up breaking down, but look, you never know.
Yeah. So the upshot though is that there are Thread enabled products on the market now, like you said, but Matter, quote unquote, the software part, officially launches this fall.
Yeah, that's my understanding. And I think Paula said that Home Assistant is on track to support Matter. So if you have a Home Assistant hub, you'll be in. Likewise for the existing devices, the Apple TV 4K and HomePod minis and stuff like that. This gives me a reason to put a HomePod mini in my bedroom, I think, because that would solve my Zigbee problems.
Oh.
The other thing on the Zigbee upgrade path for existing devices, some vendors are going to upgrade stuff that already is out. Some vendors are probably going to make you buy new versions of the same exact hardware to get the Zigbee version, the Thread version, even though they're functionally identical. Your mileage may vary based on the vendors that you've purchased stuff from in the past. But I think we've reached the end of our document, Brad.
Yeah, I think that's pretty much everything. This is exciting.
I'm very excited about, I've between our conversation with Paulus and the reading that we did for this, I'm pretty excited about the potential here. I hope that everything that we're seeing comes to pass.
Yes, the promise is great. Let's say that. I mean, obviously, the rollout of new standards and platforms is usually messy, and it may not always live up to all the potential. But like they're talking a big game, and if they bring that, then this is really cool.
Well, and the fact that there isn't like one, typically if you think back to like the classic standards wars like HD DVD and Blu-ray, there was always one standout, one holdout, like Sony or Philips, whoever was the HD DVD holdout. I guess it was Philips because Sony was Blu-ray.
I thought Philips was part of Blu-ray. Who was HD DVD? I forget.
Toshiba, maybe?
That sounds right.
Toshiba and Microsoft maybe were the big ones for HD. Anyway, the upshot is there's not a holdout. I went down the list of the 250 vendors. It is a subset of the Zigbee Alliance vendors, which was like there's like 400 or something Zigbee Alliance vendors. It's only 250 of the on the Thread stuff. But the upshot is we're looking at I don't see any big obvious holdouts, which is exciting. That's a good thing. The people that do a lot of work in Zigbee and have all jumped on, it seems like, including like the small, like the budget vendors that do the things you don't think about that it turned out to be really important, like door sensors and motion sensors and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's it. This is Thread and Matter. I hope you enjoyed the episode. If you have questions, send them in. We'll do a question episode at the end of the month. Mm-hmm. You can post in the question seeking answers channel on the Discord. If you're a patron or you can send an email to techpod@content.town. Our speaking of patrons, this is the part of the show where we thank our patrons.
Oh, my favorite part of the show.
Thank you, patrons.
Thank you. Thank you.
If you would like to find out how to support Brad and Will made a TechPod, which is 100% listener supported, you can go to patreon.com/techpod. And for as little as $2 a month, you can help, chuck a little cheddar our way and keep the show going.
That's right.
We like to thank all of our patrons, but especially our executive producer tier patrons who get thanked every single episode, unless we mess up and forget, including Paddle Creek Games, makers of Fractured Veil, Andrew Slosky, Octothorpe _Bunny Kids ++.
Whoa.
That's a new class if I see one. Congratulations, Bunny Fiend, by the way. The birth of a new Bunny Fiend happened last week or this week. I can't remember.
Wow, congrats.
Recently. Cool. Just Wedge, Joel Krauska, Twinkie at Hacker Summer Camp, and James Kamek. Thank you all so much. We appreciate you.
Yes,
and everyone.
Yes.
The benefits of supporting us on the show: you get access to the Fabulous Tech Pod Patreon, Discord, where there are 3,000 really smart nerds in there talking about the same kind of stuff that you're probably interested in and didn't even know about. And every month, if you're at the $5 tier or higher, you get access to a special patron exclusive episode. So that's it.
All correct. And I can confirm.
Those are 100%. So yeah, that's the show. And if you subscribe at higher tiers, we thank you at different frequencies. Yes. It turns out.
Yes.
The executive producer patrons get thanked at the 20,000K frequency.
Yes.
Anyway, that'll do it for us. That was a bad joke. I apologize. We will see you all next week. Brad, do you have any closing wisdom for the show?
I was sitting here trying to decide if I should bring up, or rather ask, if you knew that the phrase "all correct" is where the term "okay" originated from.
Correct starts with a C, Brad.
I know that. That's the whole thing. We should, you know what? That sounds
Did you learn this from TikTok? This seems like a TikTok fact.
No, this is from like 150 years ago.
TikTok facts are always full of shit.
This sounds like a cold open waiting to happen. We'll see you next time.
Is this like to come?
No.
Which is abbreviated TK?
It is an old newspaper thing from literally the mid 1800s.
That's what TK comes from too.
What?
Well, you put TKs in when you have something that is a work that has not yet appeared, and it's to come.
Interesting.
TKOMME, I think it's German. Anyway.
It's some weird thing that some Boston area newspaper did in the 1800s.
Oh, fucking Boston.
We'll get into it another time.
See you all next week. Bye, everybody.